Hey, Mike.
Hi, Caleb. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing quite well. Quite well. This is a delightful afternoon recording for us.
Yeah, we usually record in the evenings, but we decided to record this afternoon, and so it's still light out. It's nice.
Yeah, mix things up a little bit. What are you drinking this afternoon?
I am having a gimlet, and to twist it up a little bit, I added a quarter ounce of cherry herring, so it's a little bit, little pinkish and a little bit sweeter, and I like it. I started making my own simple syrup, which is not a big feat, but I made more than one serving's worth, so it's in a little jug and ready for use in the future.
Excellent.
What about you?
I am drinking a Cuba Libre, or as it's known by most people, a rum and coke.
Sorry to interrupt. I was just watching a movie that was added to HBO yesterday, the infamous Cocktail with Tom Cruise.
Oh yeah, classic.
And that was one of the jokes. He was sort of concerned he didn't know what a Cuba Libre was, and just said, "Why didn't you just tell me it's a damn rum and coke?" So,
Well, it is just a damn rum and coke. Although I did make it with the Mexican coke, so it's quite nice.
all right. So today we are going to talk about the recent numbers that came out from Tesla for their third quarter deliveries. So car companies at the end of their quarter, so 3 months of production, will come out and announce how many cars they delivered. And then about a month or so later, the full financials will come out and they'll do the analyst calls. But you get a little bit of a preview of what happened. And Tesla's committed to getting that out 3 days after the quarter ended. And so this past Friday, September 30th, the quarter ended. And so today on Sunday, we actually get the numbers. Tesla released them, and Tesla PR actually emailed them to us directly this time, which was great.
That's
So
pretty exciting. We've arrived.
we got them the moment they were released, and so we're recording a few hours later, and wanted to sort of break down what happened there, what the implications are going forward, and what, if anything, might be juiced about these numbers. Some of the bears in the financial world are not happy about the numbers, so we'll sort of dissect that a bit too.
Excellent. So, what would you give it as a if you had to give them a letter grade for the quarter? How would you grade their quarterly performance?
I would say this delivery count seems like a B plus.
Oh, that's not bad.
Yeah, they did a little better than they said, and I think that they delivered 24,500 vehicles. That number will change slightly as they do their very final accounting on it, but essentially it counts for the number of vehicles that were actually delivered to a customer. Title, registration, all that was occurred. So not just how many they sold or reserved online, but actually in the hands of customers. And that's the most they've ever done. So it's a record number of deliveries. And the mix is pretty good as well. We've got, they announced 15,800 were Model S's and 8,700 were Model X. So that works out to about 35% Model X and about 65% Model S.
That's more than I would have expected.
On which side?
More
The
X's,
total?
more X's than I would have expected, which almost sounds like a bit of a tongue twister there. More X's than I would have expected.
Yeah, they finally seem to have gotten X a little bit under control in terms of production and delivery capabilities.
So, and you mentioned a record, but that you mean like that's an internal record for Tesla, not some sort of industry-wide record or of any sort?
That's correct, yeah. Just in terms of what Tesla has done. And the previous 2 quarters had been pretty rough in terms of deliveries, and really because they were using a lot of the production capabilities for Model X, but Model X was slowing down things to the point where the past 2. So if you look back when Model X was first started introduced, it was in the 4th quarter of 2015. So the holiday period of 2015 is when the first delivery started happening for Model X, and they delivered just 206 in the first 3 months that it was available. And then the next quarter, in the following 3 months, 1,000% improvement. They delivered 2,400. And then almost 100% improvement the next 3 months. They delivered 4,600. And then in this quarter, getting up to the period now, they had an 88% improvement, getting to 8,700. So Model X has really started ramping, and it looks like based on these sort of percentage improvements, they've got at least one or two more quarters of Model X still continuing to ramp. I just can't imagine that they're going to continue in the 80% improvement rate for much longer. And that had sort of come at the detriment of Model S, where the previous two quarters were sequential declines of over 20%. So that's a lot of numbers, but essentially Model S got the short end of the stick, and they use that capacity for X. And now finally, X is at a level where when both of those are running, the combined created a very big improvement of 70% improvement over the previous quarter. So they delivered 70% more vehicles than they did in the previous 3 months, which is quite a big amount. 70% improvement on anything is generally quite good, and to do that in only 3 months, I think is pretty impressive.
Yeah, and they also said that there were over 5,000, I guess, still in transit at the end of the quarter, which I guess speaks to probably how many they're shipping, their velocity, I guess, towards the end of the quarter versus throughout the quarter.
Yeah, exactly. So there's two numbers, right? There's the number that they make, and then there's the number they deliver. And for overseas, and also in the United States, there might be cars on trucks. And so they also said that they had 5,500 or so in transit. And so those will instantly be part of the next quarter, Q4. And they mentioned that to make it clear that it isn't as if they sort of sold everything they made, and now they're starting with a totally blank slate, because the previous quarter, there was a 5,000 in transit carryover as well. So this quarter started with 5,000, and next quarter will also start with 5,000. So it looks like they still have a little bit of work to do in terms of their logistics to try and get that number down. But they also produced 25,000. So they made more cars than they delivered, and they exited with 5,000. So the delta seems to have come from some inventory cars that they also sold. Some of the loaner cars, some of the floor models. And so that sort of gets into some of these other things that have been going on. But one last point, just to sort of make it a little bit more concrete, and this really kind of struck me, was so the production rose to 25,000. So that's an increase of 37% from Q2 of 18,000 vehicles. So that's the actual number made. And so that's 6,840 more vehicles made in that 92-day period. So a quarter is 3 months, and there was actually 92 days. And assuming they work all 7 days a week, which we currently have been told they do, that would equate to 74 more cars made per day than 3 months ago. That's a pretty big difference from the sort of one line at that factory. So that really was like, I had to check my numbers a bunch on that to make sure that 74 number was correct, but I did the math a few times. So that's a lot more cars rolling off the line to squeeze into the same physical amount of time and physical space.
Yeah, that's impressive. Do you know if they have like one production line that has increased its velocity, or have they brought on like multiple parallel lines that are all churning cars along in parallel?
So apparently there's a few components, right? There's the stamping of the parts. There's the paint and body shop. And then there's sort of the final assembly line. So apparently the final assembly line is mixed, but then for each of the sub parts, they have to decide, and they might have two paint lines, and they might have the stamping machine will alternate. So the bottleneck seems to have been the final assembly. And so it seems as if the final assembly now with the mixed S and X is able to not be as slow as it used to be or have as many problems. And one of the other stats they've been talking about in previous quarters was that the number of hours per car has been dropping. So that would mean that there's also more automation happening and less defects requiring more human intervention. So I think that's really solid improvements, and certainly they need to keep making these improvements. But this is really sort of the last quarter before they really start getting things ready for Model 3. And we know that for a few reasons. The first is that they don't expect their Q4 deliveries to increase that much. So they're not going to be spending a lot of effort on producing more Model S's and Model X's this quarter when they previously have been trying to do that. That's one tell.
Quick question. Has Q4 been flat like year over year for them? Is that like a normal like holiday quarter thing for car sales?
No, actually, for Tesla, Q4 has been their historical best quarters, if you look back. So they've typically done better in Q4 than in other quarters, even though they have the challenges of it being a slightly shorter quarter. I think there's 1 or 2 less days. And then also getting those cars in the winter weather to East Coast states and other parts of the country can be more challenging. That's one thing that they're not going to continue to try and make more vehicles, substantially more, is one tell. The second tell is that they really wanted this quarter to be good, and we'll get into that in a second, because they know they're going to need to raise more money. They're going to do some more stock and potentially more debt to get more capital for Model 3 and really start building the production lines for Model 3 in some of the extra space in the factory that has just never been used by Tesla yet. So it sounds like a lot of their engineering efforts in the floor will be devoted to Model 3. And the one other thing they said is that they don't expect to potentially be profitable until after the Model 3 comes out now. And so they intend to spend quite a lot of money next quarter and the following quarters in preparation for Model 3. So all of those factors lead us to sort of have to say that this quarter, Q3 that just ended, is really important to Tesla for the financial community. And Tesla even and Elon even said as much to all the staff a few weeks ago at the end of August, really imploring them to sell as many cars as they could and try and make it a profitable quarter. They said they were on the razor's edge of being profitable, which would be the first time in quite a number of years.
So it sounds, when you say imploring them to sell more cars, I'm getting a very Glengarry, Glenn Ross vibe going on here. Is Elon Musk awarding steak knives to the second place seller?
I'm not sure. I don't know if he's going to fire anyone, but I wouldn't put it past him for third place. What did they
do to try and focus on that?
So there's two big things. The first would be things they've done to the product. So just generally, as Tesla's introduced lower priced products, people have bought more. Pretty standard process. And so 3 things that have happened very recently that could have affected this quarter and helped. So the first that happened was they introduced a 60 kilowatt pack, 60 kilowatt hour pack. And that was now their lowest price option for Model S entry point. That happened in June. So that pulled the price down of getting started with a Tesla. So that would have helped sales.
That's the 75 one that's actually downrated to 60 and then has like a software unlock. Is that the...
Yep.
Okay.
Exactly. And so that also then has the ability to later help the profit margin of those vehicles by someone choosing to software unlock it, and then that money would be all profit.
Presumably that means the margins are lower than what they would have been if they would only put like a 60 kilowatt pack in there in the first place, right? Because that means they're taking a hit on the initial sale, hoping for an upsell on some percentage of them over time.
Yep. And unlike certain companies like Apple or others who sort of use a memory as a way to extract more money from people, even though the cost of that memory is not commensurate with the $100 or more price increase. As you mentioned, the actual cost of the battery is a pretty real cost. So yeah, it definitely does hurt their margins. It's not something that they would do just for fun to try and get more sales. I think it purely is around lowering the price to a place that they can still make some money, still hit a profit margin they're acceptable, knowing some percentage will upgrade, and the reduced effort of having just one battery pack to make instead of having 2 packs, which would increase the complexity of that manufacturing process. So that's the first thing. The other thing that they did was they introduced a 2-year leasing option. Most lease, I don't know, have you ever leased a car?
I have, yes.
What was the lease time on that? Do you remember?
I did one that was a 24-month, and I've done a 39-month, I believe, once. which was a weird number. I'm sure there was some sort of financial shenanigans that got them to 39 months instead of 36.
Yeah. Did you do the 24-month because it was a lower initial price, or you only wanted the car for 2 years? What was the?
It was my first car out of college, and so yeah, it was a low price introductory, like show us your recent graduation thing, and you get a discounted rate, and it was one of these like scam type. Well, scam is strong, but one of these like targeted specials that they have. So there really wasn't all that much thought put into it.
Got it. Yeah. So they sent out a lot of emails. I got an email. I bet you probably did too.
Yeah, I did.
Since we did the test drives, saying something like $593 starting point, something right around there.
Yeah, it was definitely below 600. There was a 5 there, which seemed important, I guess.
And then the last thing, which probably doesn't have a huge impact on the quantity, but on the margin, on margin contribution would make a big difference, was the P100DL was introduced at the end of August and started shipping in the past month. So the big impact here is a fair number of people who want the highest end Teslas, who are some of the wealthiest Tesla owners, will trade in their existing Teslas to get the latest and greatest. And so, getting another sale of their highest margin car, which is, more than $125,000, helps offset some of those lower price vehicles that are being sold. And also they get to take back, in many cases, really strong, high-performance cars that aren't that used, and then refurbish them and sell them again. So that car, the P100DL, also would have impacted the end of this quarter and helped some of the revenue and also growth margin, if not the count of cars sold.
Yeah, and that's not even to take into account the amount of free publicity they got out of launching the fastest production car or sedan or whatever. I felt like I was reading and hearing about that all over the place, like pretty far out of proportion for what, like if BMW released a slightly more improved 7 Series sedan, like I don't think they would have gotten the publicity that Tesla got for releasing that P100D beast.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's right. I feel like I saw it a lot of places outside of. I mean, it was in the CNN and Bloomberg and all the business press, all the mainstream press about the quickest car. So it definitely got a ton of attention and certainly helps the brand in terms of people who might have heard of Tesla and continuing to fight that stigma, which we've been talking about throughout the entire series of electric cars being slow or not interesting from a performance point of view. So that definitely would have contributed. And so that's sort of on the product side, but then there's also the salesmanship side of things. And one thing that we heard a lot about over the past couple months, and especially in the past month as the quarter's gotten closer to ending, is that there's been a lot of discounting happening. And there was a bit of a back and forth on Twitter very recently with a Tesla customer, and Elon, where he was saying, like, this is a little weird. I'm sort of getting told that I'm not going to get my car. I'm going to get a different car, and the discounting is weird. And Elon said, I'll look into it. And the result of it was him replying back with an email memo he had sent to the entire staff, basically saying we cannot discount our cars. It's fundamental to the brand that we don't discount. I pay full price. My family pays full price. Every celebrity pays full price. The only reason we ever discount is because the car is used. The car is damaged in some way in transit, and so we need to make up for that. Or it's like a loaner or show car, and so we need to more fairly assign the right value since it's not a brand new car. And still hearing some examples of people who got brand new cars, but they have this weird concept of new cars that still are having some more miles than 10 or 12 that would happen in just like initial testing. So it's a little blurry what their definition of new is, but it does sound like there were some discounts and also some discounts on sort of delivery fees and registration fees that could amount to a few $1,000s. But all in all, it's definitely comforting to me, I guess. Comforting, but positive to hear that Elon definitely wanted to make it very clear that discounting is not the Tesla way and that he doesn't want that to happen. even though a month later he had said to the salespeople, do everything you can to sell as many cars. So it's a little convenient to have that happen at the very end of the month, to have found out this happened and say it's not good anymore. But yeah, I definitely appreciate the idea that the cars are the price you see online and you just pay for them, and that's what it is, and you don't have to worry about haggling for a lower price.
Yeah, you don't have to wait for the big President's Day sale or whatever kind of shenanigans are going on at most car dealers.
Yeah, exactly, because it really creates this incentive, and I think, of waiting. And that's going to be one of the challenges for the next quarter is a lot of people knew there were discounts, and now, starting in October now, those same discounts aren't necessarily available. And so do you play this game of waiting till the end of the month or the end of the quarter, hoping that Tesla will start issuing more discounts and deals? And so that's one of the big reasons you, as a company, if you can help yourself from discounting, you'll be in a better position long term, because you're not necessarily creating more demand, you're just shifting it forward. And so then you have a deficit in the next quarter to make up. Since a lot of people who maybe were going to buy in a few months or a year decided to pull the trigger now, those sales look like net new sales, but they may have happened in the future. And so now you have to go find another customer and more to make up for it and keep growing. So it's a pretty vicious cycle, doing discounting.
You gotta resist the BOGO.
Yeah, no BOGOs, no buy one get one free Teslas. That would be a very aggressive discount, I think.
Unprecedented.
Unprecedented, and would certainly put them out of business, I think. So I think that the interesting thing here is they've done a pretty good job in increasing production, but 24,000 cars is nowhere near the level they need to be to support Model 3, our favorite topic and the reason we started the show.
Our raison d'etre.
Exactly. So it looks as if this is positive, but they still have a long way to go and not much time to hit the level of 500,000 cars a year run rate in 2018, which they used to say 2020, and then Elon and team moved it up to 2018. So they have just about 5 quarters to do that.
And so you've done some math here. I'm now seeing that you've actually crunched some numbers here, and you've come up with some estimates as to how they're going to get there.
Yeah. So if you take the current improvement rate they had this quarter over last, which was 37%, as evidence that that's possible for them to make that sort of jump in a 3-month time period, and you project that forward for 1 quarter, they get to 34,000 a month. Per quarter.
Assuming it's flat next quarter, and then the improvements resume and aren't detracted by the Model 3 work that's probably going on in parallel.
Yeah. Those are assumptions are, they have to figure out a way to actually make these improvements. But essentially, you could get there in 5 quarters, 5 steps, essentially 5 quarters from where they're at now. You would end at 121,500 vehicles per quarter, which puts you just at 490,000 cars a year rate. So they would need to keep up the 37% growth rate for 5 quarters in a row from this level to get there. And so it's not going to be easy. I don't think it will be as consistent a rate as 37%. I think certainly turning on the Model 3 line once it starts going should have a faster acceleration rate because that car is built and designed for a higher throughput, and obviously the production ramp that they're designing for it and the systems they're designing for Model 3 are expecting a much higher steady state than what Model S or X would ever hit. Model S is already the best-selling car in its class, so it maybe has a doubling of interest, but it's not going to ever be the Model S and X at 500,000 vehicles a year. But just theoretically, yeah, they'd have to improve 37% a quarter for the next 5 quarters, and they could get there. So it's not orders of magnitude improvements per quarter or anything like that. So if we see something like 20 to 40% improvements of each quarter following the next one, it would be possible for them to get there. So I see a path for it happening, but it's definitely going to be choppy. So.
One thing I thought that was curious in looking at your numbers too is if you actually project it out and they do hit these numbers that they're going to need to hit to get to that run rate, it looks like they're going to hit their 200,000th car produced, where the federal tax credits in the U.S. would phase out before they start shipping some Model 3s. Am I reading that correctly?
It's possible that happens. A few things that are important to remember about the tax credit. So we're talking here about the U.S. federal tax credit rebate, I guess, which is it's a credit, which is a $7,500 credit for electric vehicles. Each manufacturer has the ability to sell up to 200,000 vehicles in the U.S. before that credit starts phasing itself out. So Tesla hasn't yet broken out the exact number of U.S. sales versus international sales, but they've been accumulating. That number continually is going closer and closer to 200,000, but it's not close to 200,000 yet. And they certainly know what that number is, and they haven't shared it. But it does seem as if within the first quarter or two of Model 3 being produced, they will be very close to that happening. And the law currently, as it's written, states that the quarter in which that occurs, they have the next quarter following, they still get the full 7,500, and then it starts ramping down. I think it goes down to 3,500 or so the next quarter, and then 1,250 or so the quarter after that, and then it's fully phased out. So if Tesla is really trying to be as maximizing as much of the discount as they can, which Elon has said in the past, they will do the right thing for the customer, even if that means a short-term quarterly miss. Because what they could do is time it so that Model 3 is ramping up and they're ready to produce 50 or 60,000 in a quarter, maybe more. And they know they're about to hit 200,000. What they would want to do is hit that 200,000 number like the first day of a fresh quarter. So they have the full 3 months of that quarter plus the full 3 months after, so that they could have a full 6 months of producing with the full discount, even though they hit 200,000, if that makes sense. So they're going to need to really try and time it so they hit, the Model 3 is ramping up and ready to produce at a pretty high throughput. And the way they can modulate this would be not delivering many cars in the US and delivering them almost all overseas, so that they can try and stay right under that 200,000 barrier and then hit that barrier right in the first couple days of a quarter. And then they've got 6 months to sell as many as they want and blow through that 200,000 number. So they could theoretically sell 400, 500,000 cars, and everyone who was part of that would get the discount. It's all about that timing. So that's where we really need to trust that they're paying attention. And is the big benefit to them, right, obviously, is that discount, even though Tesla doesn't get that money, their customer does. And so that's going to be a huge impact on a $30,000 car, $35,000 car, whether or not you get $7,500 back or not, changes the price dramatically.
Right.
And so it will drastically change, I think, the amount of people who want to take the car and buy the car, and who can afford it even. So I think everything they can do to make sure that they maximize the amount of time will be something they want to do. So I bet there's a lot of smart people inside Tesla modeling this and keeping a very careful eye on those U.S. delivery numbers.
Interesting. So it sounds like the people on the reservation list will have a pretty good shot of incorporating that credit into their purchase if they buy their Model 3 when their spot in line comes up.
I think the first few hundred, I think the first couple 100,000. We know the list now is over 400,000. So I don't think people now signing up will get the full credit, but they could very well get the reduced, the 3,000 something credit. And this is one of the reasons I went and got the reservation the very first day before it was even unveiled, because I wanted the best chance possible of getting that discount. And regardless, especially because the deposit was refundable.
So I remember in the Bolt episode, we were talking about how Chevy's target price for the Bolt was including, they were including that tax credit in their target price to get to the 30,000 or whatever it was mark. Is Tesla's Model 3 price estimate of like 35,000 or whatever it is that for the raw price of the vehicle, or is that including the theoretical tax credit?
That is before the credit. So that
Okay.
would be the non-subsidized price.
Okay.
And one of the reasons I think they do that is the Model 3 will certainly be available in all countries relatively soon after it's introduced. And so they need to have a price, and they say it on their site before incentives. And also the incentives are different. California has more incentives than some other states in the U.S. at least.
Right.
And the Bolt is not planned to go outside the U.S. initially. And I think they want as many advantages as they can in saying the price is that low. But yeah, effectively the list price for the Model 3 is in the U.S. would be $28,000 or so, $27.50. So yeah, it's actually that's the thing for me is like it'll be a really good car at $35,000 and a really really good car at sub $30,000.
Yeah, and even $1,000 less since you've already put $1,000 on layaway. Basically,
That's true. It is already on layaway, and then a referral link and a couple other discounts will help get it.
You can stack some coupons.
Pretty much.
So, did you have any other thoughts for the Q3 numbers here?
I think it's good that we actually talked about these numbers first, because I think that the important thing is that this is really a transition period starting now for Tesla, because everything previously, the Model 3 was really about sort of in the design phase. Design ended the last 3 months, and now they started doing supplier contracts. But the real heavy workload and cost and work in the factory is going to be starting now. And so the things that come out in the next quarterly call, I think in about a month or so, the analysts and folks on the call will really be pushing, and I'm sure Tesla will make a lot of, will have a lot more knowledge about how things are going with Model 3. And so going forward, the future quarters are really going to be about how Model 3 is doing and less about how Model S and X are doing. Certainly those guys, the S and X, are paying the bills, but the Model 3 is really, depending on how quickly they can get that, if they really get close to that self-imposed deadline, or if they miss it by a year, it's going to be a really big difference in terms of how the company fares and how valuable the company is, to be honest. And so I think the next episode about not our next episode, but the episode about the quarterly update will focus mostly on Model 3 info. So I think it's good that we were able to talk about this and also just sort of show that Tesla and talk through that Tesla has been able to continually improve their production capabilities. And that's been one of the sore spots that a lot of people have lobbed at Tesla, is that they can't actually produce a lot of cars. And they're not producing a lot of cars when you compare them to a GM or Ford. But GM and Ford have dozens and dozens of brands and price points that are 3 times lower, 4 times lower than Tesla's. And so you would expect Tesla to produce and sell fewer cars. So the important thing is, when is Tesla going to hit supply and demand equilibrium on the Model S and X? And it doesn't seem like they've hit it yet, because they keep ramping up production in very large percentages, which would indicate that it still is supply constrained. You'll start to see a really big increase in the amount of production relative to deliveries if there wasn't enough demand. They would be building up inventory unnecessarily, but that isn't the case. They sort of are exiting just about the same as they were producing. So I think they've got a few more quarters still before they hit that level. So yeah, those are a couple final thoughts. Anything from you?
No, that sounds interesting. They're obviously still proving themselves and still proving that they can keep increasing capacity, and they're going to have to keep doing that all next year. And I guess hope that there is no significant quake along the Hayward Fault where their factory is located, which could probably throw a spanner in the works, as it were. But yeah, no, I think that's interesting. So let's. Oh man, I almost got through without saying interesting over and over again.
Bingo.
That's a perfect time to bring this in for a landing. So if people want to reach us, Caleb, how can they do so?
We have a few ways. The first is on Twitter We are at The Tesla Show, so you can tweet us your thoughts about the episode or past episodes or ideas for future episodes. We are on theteslashow.com, where you can find all of our episodes and links to subscribe, as well as leave comments on individual episodes. And we also participate in our own subreddit, r/The Tesla Show on Reddit, where we have discussion happening there as well. And so with that, talk to you soon. Talk to you later, Mike.
All right. See you later.